The first thing folks noticed about him was the silence. Not the empty kind, but the heavy sort that followed a man who had seen too much land, too many winters, and learned to speak only when words mattered. He stood in the doorway of the boarding house like he owned the dust itself, hat pulled low, boots worn but clean, coat stitched with money that did not need to shout. Outside, the town of Red Willow baked under a late summer sun, horses tied to rails, shutters half closed, gossip drifting thicker than smoke. Inside, every breath seemed to pause when his shadow crossed the floor. He was known as a rich cowboy, though few dared say it to his face. His ranch stretched farther than most men could ride in a day, his cattle branded deep, his name tied to banknotes and quiet deals. Yet wealth had not softened him. His eyes held the hard line of a man who trusted fences more than people. He did not smile, he did not linger. And when he spoke, it was like the snap of a rope pulled tight. "I need a wife," he said, plain as dry bread. The woman behind the counter thought she misheard him. So did everyone else. A chair creaked, someone coughed. The piano player stopped mid-note. In Red Willow, a man did not announce such things unless he was drunk, desperate, or dangerous. He was none of those. He set a small leather pouch on the counter, the sound of coins unmistakable, and added, "Just for a while." And it would be an arrangement. That was how the story began. Not with love, not with chance, but with an order made by a man used to being obeyed. She had not planned on being noticed that day. She was only there for work, sweeping floors, carrying trays, keeping her head down the way a woman learned to do when the world offered little mercy. Life had taught her to listen more than speak, to weigh every promise, to expect disappointment dressed as kindness. She had crossed plains and buried dreams long before she ever reached Red Willow. A past like hers did not fade just because the sky was wide and blue. When his eyes found her, it felt like standing in the path of a sudden storm. He studied her the way he studied land, measuring, deciding, not unkindly, but without softness either. He asked her name, she gave it. He asked if she could ride, cook, keep quiet when needed, and play the part of a respectable wife in front of bankers, neighbors, and men who liked to pry. She answered honestly, yes to most, no to questions that did not feel safe. Then he told her the rule. "No real feelings," he said. "No attachments, this is business. We shake hands, we keep our distance, and when it's done, we walk away clean." It should have been easy to laugh and refuse. Every sensible voice in her head warned her to do exactly that. But hunger has a way of bending pride, and the coins on the counter promised more than money. They promised time, safety, a chance to breathe without fear of tomorrow. She thought of the long road behind her and the shorter one ahead if she said no. So she agreed. The ride to the ranch took most of the day. The land changed as they went, fields opening into rolling grass, fences running straight as vows. He rode ahead, steady and sure, giving her space, keeping his word about distance even then. The ranch house stood solid against the sky, wood darkened by years, windows catching the light like watchful eyes. It was not a place built for warmth, but it was built to last. Inside, everything had its order, boots lined neat. Tools hung just so, even the air felt controlled. He showed her a room at the far end of the hall and told her it was hers. He did not linger at the door. He did not look back. Days settled into a careful rhythm. They played their parts in town, her arm resting lightly in his hand firm but respectful. People watched, they whispered. A rich cowboy with a sudden wife was news worth chewing on. At home, they kept their distance, speaking only when needed, sharing meals across a wide table that felt like a border between two countries. Yet rules, like fences, are tested by time. It began with small things. A shared laugh when a calf escaped the pen. A quiet thank you when she patched his coat without being asked. The way he listened when she spoke of the weather, of nothing at all, as if those words mattered. She caught him watching her once when he thought she was not looking, his face unreadable, jaw set like he was fighting a thought he did not welcome. She reminded herself of the agreement. She reminded herself why she was there. He did the same, burying himself in work, riding hard, coming home late. But the house seemed to notice the change even if they pretended not to. The walls creaked at night. The wind carried sounds that felt too close. The kiss happened by accident, or so they both told themselves later. A storm had rolled in fast, the kind that turned sky to iron and sent horses stamping. She slipped on the porch steps, a sharp cry torn from her before pride could stop it. He caught her before she fell, hands strong, steady. For a moment neither moved. Rain hammered down, her breath came quick. His grip tightened just enough to remind her he was real. She looked up. He looked down. It was not planned, it was not careful. It was a single kiss, brief and sudden, born of fear and closeness and something neither had named. The world did not end. The storm did not stop, but something inside them shifted, quiet and irreversible. He stepped back at once, face hard, eyes dark with anger at himself more than her. "That was the rule," he said, voice tight. "The only one." She nodded, though her heart raced like a spooked horse. She agreed it would not happen again. They stood there in the rain like strangers who shared a secret too heavy to carry. From that night on, the space between them felt charged, every glance loaded, every silence loud. The arrangement still stood, at least on the surface. But Red Willow had a way of testing what men claim to control. So did the past, which has a habit of riding back when least expected. He had his reasons for needing a wife. She had her reasons for agreeing. And somewhere between money, pretense, and one broken rule, a line had been crossed that could not be redrawn. As the next storm gathered on the horizon, darker than the last, both of them knew the truth they refused to say out loud. The hardest part was no longer pretending to be married. The hardest part was pretending that kiss had meant nothing when everything ahead depended on believing the lie. Morning came with a pale light that crept across the plains and slipped through the ranch house windows without asking permission. The storm had passed, but it left the land damp and restless, like it was waiting to see what would come next. She woke before the bell, heart still beating too fast, the memory of rain and that single mistake clinging to her like a shadow. For a long moment she lay still, listening to the house breathe, wondering if he was awake too, wondering if he felt the same unease pressing against her ribs. At breakfast they spoke of ordinary things, the weather, a fence that needed fixing, a shipment due by week's end. Their voices stayed even, careful, as if they were walking across thin ice. He did not meet her eyes. She did not force him to. The space between them felt wider than the long table, yet tighter than before, stretched and pulled in opposite directions. After the meal, he left early, riding out with the sun barely clear of the hills. Work had always been his refuge, and today he clung to it harder than ever. He pushed the cattle, checked the far fences, spoke little to the hands. They noticed the tension, though none dared ask. A rich cowboy could afford silence, and everyone on that land understood when to keep their distance. She stayed behind, learning the rhythms of the house, the quiet corners and the places where dust gathered no matter how often she swept. The ranch had a history, and it showed in small details, a worn groove in the stair rail from countless hands. Old brands carved into a beam near the kitchen, marks of past deals and older lives. It was a place built by men who believed in holding on, even when the world tried to pull things apart. In town, their sudden marriage continued to stir talk. Storekeepers smiled a little too wide. Neighbors asked questions wrapped in politeness. She answered as best she could, keeping her story straight, her tone calm. Playing a wife came easier than she expected, though sometimes the weight of it pressed down hard. At night, alone in her room, she wondered how long a person could live inside a borrowed life before it began to demand something back. There were reasons he needed her there, reasons deeper than convenience. That much became clear when strangers started riding past the ranch fence, slow and curious, eyes measuring. Men from the bank, distant kin sniffing around old claims. Folks who remembered his family name and believed it came with rights they could still collect. A single man was easier to challenge. A married one, settled and respectable, sent a different message. She saw it in the way he squared his shoulders when visitors arrived, the way his voice carried more weight when he introduced her as his wife. The lie gave him armor. And she was part of it now, whether she liked it or not. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, she found him in the barn, repairing a broken stall. The smell of hay and leather filled the air. For a moment they worked side by side in silence, passing tools, their hands brushing once by accident, Both flinched, then pretended not to notice. "You did not ask why," he said suddenly, eyes fixed on the wood he was fitting into place. "Why what?" she replied, though she knew. "Why I needed this," he said. "The marriage," she waited, giving him space to speak or retreat. "He did neither right away. My father lost this land once," he said at last. "Gambled it away, piece by piece. I bought it back with years of work and a promise I would never let it slip again. There are people who would like to see me fail? A man alone is easier to corner." She nodded, understanding more than he might expect. The world had always been harder on those without protection, and marriage was one of the oldest shields there was. "And you," he added, not looking at her. "You did not ask what happens after. I figured that was part of the rule," she said quietly. "We walk away clean." He tightened a bolt harder than needed. "Yes," but neither of them sounded convinced. Days turned into weeks, and the tension did not fade. It settled into their bones, showing itself in small ways. The way his voice softened when he thought she was tired. The way she defended him when town gossip grew sharp. They shared meals more often now, the distance between them shrinking by inches, though neither acknowledged it. Trouble came riding in on a dry afternoon, announced by the sound of hooves and a cloud of dust. A man with a sharp smile and eyes that missed nothing dismounted at the gate, hat tipped low. He claimed to be family, some distant relation with old papers and older grudges. He spoke of shared blood and forgotten promises, of land that should have been divided differently. The rich cowboy listened, face carved from stone. She stood at his side, hand resting lightly on his arm, playing her part. The stranger's eyes flicked to her, calculating. "Did not know you had a wife," he said. "Things change?" "Yes," the cowboy replied. "They do." The visitor left with a thin smile and a warning wrapped in courtesy. When the dust settled, the ranch felt smaller, the sky closer. That night, neither of them slept well. Her past stirred too, refusing to stay buried. A letter arrived from the east, forwarded through 3 towns, the paper creased and worn. She recognized the hand at once and felt her stomach drop. Someone from a life she had run from knew where she was now. The safety she had borrowed felt suddenly fragile. She hid the letter in her room, unsure whether to burn it or confess. The rule about no attachments echoed in her mind, twisted now into something heavier. Trust was an attachment too, was it not? He noticed the change in her, the way she startled at sounds, the way her smile faltered. One evening he asked if she was all right. She said yes. The lie sat between them, thick and dangerous. The ranch prepared for a gathering, a small event meant to show unity and strength. Neighbors would come. Deals would be discussed, appearances would matter more than ever. She wore a simple dress, borrowed and altered, and when she stood beside him, she saw something shift in the eyes of those who watched, respect, curiosity, envy. He offered his arm. She took it. For a moment, it felt almost real. Music played, laughter rose, glasses clinked. They danced once, slow and careful, his hand steady at her back. The room seemed to fade, leaving only the measured steps and the awareness of how close they stood. The memory of that forbidden kiss hovered, unspoken but alive. When the night ended and the guests departed, the house felt too quiet. They stood near the door, unsure how to part. Words crowded his mouth and went unsaid. Hers too. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of change. Old threats lingered at the edges of the land. New ones waited in shadows. And between a rich cowboy bound by his own rules and a woman hiding from her past, the lie that had brought them together began to feel like the most dangerous truth of all. The days that followed carried a strange weight, as if the land itself knew something was coming and was holding its breath. The ranch hands went about their work, but their voices stayed low, their glances sharper. Word traveled fast in places like this, even when no one spoke it aloud. A rich cowboy with enemies and a wife who appeared out of nowhere made people curious, and curiosity often walked hand in hand with trouble. He began locking doors at night, something he had not done in years. The sound of the bolt sliding into place echoed through the house, a reminder that the world beyond the walls was no longer distant. She noticed how he checked the windows before turning in, how his hand lingered near his belt when unfamiliar riders passed the fence. He did not explain. he did not have to. Fear has a way of speaking without words. She carried her own worry like a hidden bruise. The letter burned in her thoughts even when it stayed hidden under loose boards in her room. She read it again one night by lantern light, her fingers trembling. The words were polite, almost friendly, but beneath them lay a warning. Someone wanted something from her? Someone who knew pieces of her past that she had sworn would never catch up to her. The ranch, the marriage, the safety she had found all felt suddenly borrowed, ready to be taken back. In town, the pressure grew. The bank requested another meeting, this time asking that she attend as well. The men smiled and nodded, but their eyes searched her face, measuring her place, her influence. She spoke when spoken to, choosing her words carefully. She had learned long ago how to survive rooms like that. Still, she felt the weight of being watched, of being judged, not just as a woman, but as a wife whose presence shifted power. On the ride home, the cowboy finally broke the silence. "They are testing us," he said. "Seeing if this marriage is real?" "And is it?" she asked before she could stop herself. He did not answer right away. His horse's hooves struck the dirt in a steady rhythm. "It is real enough to matter," he said at last. That answer followed her into sleep and stayed there, turning over and over, real enough to matter. She wondered what would happen if it stopped being real enough to protect them both. Another visitor arrived days later, this one quieter than the last. A woman, well-dressed, eyes sharp with calculation, claiming to be a distant neighbor. She brought pie and questions, her smile never reaching her eyes. She studied the house, the way they moved around each other, the small gaps and the smaller kindnesses. She lingered long enough to notice the tension and left just before supper, her farewell sweet and unsettling. "She will talk," the cowboy said after she was gone. "They always do." That night she dreamed of fences falling, of land splitting open, of being pulled in opposite directions until there was nothing left to hold. She woke with a start, the sound of footsteps outside her door freezing her breath. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. After a long moment, the steps moved away. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had come to check on her or if someone else had been moving through the house. Morning brought no answers, only more questions. A calf went missing from the north pasture. Tracks suggested someone had been there after dark. He rode out with 2 hands to investigate, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing sense that the ranch was under quiet attack. She tried to busy herself, but the walls seemed to close in. The house no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a stage, every corner watched. When she stepped outside, she noticed a rider far off near the tree line, too distant to see clearly, close enough to feel wrong. By the time she blinked, he was gone. When the cowboy returned, his jaw was set hard. "They are pushing," he said. "Seeing what I will do." "And what will you do?" she asked. "Hold," he replied. "As long as I can." Her secret pressed heavier against her chest. She wanted to tell him about the letter, about the threat that had followed her here. But fear held her back. If he saw her as a risk instead of an ally, the arrangement could end. And if it ended, so would the protection they both relied on. A small kindness broke through the tension one evening when a storm threatened again. He found her struggling with a stubborn shudder and helped without comment, his hands close but careful. For a moment they stood side by side, watching the clouds gather. The memory of their kiss stirred between them, uninvited and dangerous. "We cannot afford mistakes," he said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "I know," she answered, though her heart argued otherwise. The rule about no attachments began to feel like a lie they told themselves to stay safe. Every shared look chipped away at it. Every moment of trust built something neither of them had planned for. The conflict deepened when a notice appeared in town, posted outside the general store. A claim dispute, written in careful legal language, challenging the ownership of a section of the ranch. The cowboy read it in silence, his face unreadable. She stood beside him, feeling the eyes of the town settle on them both. "They are serious," she said. "So am I," he replied. Behind the scenes, deals were whispered, alliances hinted at. Some neighbors offered support. Others pulled away, unwilling to be caught on the wrong side. The ranch became a symbol, and symbols attract attention, not all of it welcome. Her past finally knocked louder. A man arrived in town asking questions, his description matching the one burned into her memory. She saw him from across the street and felt the world tilt. He did not see her then, but she knew it was only a matter of time. The net was closing, threads from different directions tightening around the life she was trying to build. That night she sat at the edge of her bed, the letter in her hands. The truth pressed against her lips, demanding to be spoken. Down the hall, she heard him pacing, the sound of boots heavy with worry. They were both trapped by secrets, each believing silence was the only way to survive. The ranch stood under the stars, quiet and watchful. Fences held for now, doors stayed locked. But tension does not disappear just because it is ignored. It gathers, sharpens, waits. As the wind carried distant sounds across the plains, she understood one thing with painful clarity. The marriage that had begun as a shield was becoming the center of every threat they faced. And if the truth came out about her past or his reasons, it would not just test their rule. It would force a choice neither of them was ready to make. The tension reached a point where even the quiet of the plains could not soften it. Each sunrise felt heavier than the last, as if the land itself sensed the coming reckoning. The ranch no longer felt like a place that merely needed defending. It felt like a promise under threat, one that both of them were bound to whether they admitted it or not. The man from town appeared again, this time closer, his questions less polite. She saw him speaking with the storekeeper, then the blacksmith, his eyes scanning faces as if searching for a familiar shadow. Fear tightened her chest, but she forced herself to keep walking, head high, playing the role she had taken on. A ranch wife could not afford to look hunted. That evening she told the cowboy part of the truth. Not all of it, but enough to crack the wall between them. She spoke of someone from her past, someone who would not let old debts rest. She did not say what those debts were, only that they could bring trouble to his land if left unchecked. He listened without interrupting, his face still, but his eyes darkened with concern. "You should have told me sooner," he said, not unkindly. "I was afraid," she replied. "Of losing this. Of losing what safety I have." "You will not lose it that easily," he said. "Not if I have a say?" It was the first time he had spoken as if they were truly together, not just bound by an agreement. The words settled between them, heavy with meaning. Outside, riders passed the fence again that night, closer than before. One of the ranch hands reported hearing voices near the north pasture. The missing calf was never found. Signs pointed to pressure, not outright attack, but pressure could be just as dangerous. It was meant to wear a man down, to force a mistake. He gathered the hands and spoke plainly. The ranch would stand. No one would be pushed off land bought and paid for with honest work. His confidence steadied them, but she saw the strain it took. Leadership came with a cost, and he was paying it alone. The bank sent another notice, firmer this time, hinting at foreclosure if disputes were not resolved quickly. The words were sharp, designed to unsettle. She read the letter beside him, her shoulder brushing his. Neither pulled away. "We are close," he said. "They know it." "Yes," she answered. "So do we." In town, whispers grew louder. Some folks questioned the sudden marriage openly now. Others defended it, citing how she carried herself, how she spoke for the ranch with quiet strength. The balance of opinion shifted back and forth like a swinging gate. The man from her past finally found her. He approached as she left the post office, his smile thin, eyes too knowing. He spoke softly, reminding her of things she had buried, of choices made when survival was the only goal. He hinted that silence could be bought, that trouble could be avoided if certain favors were returned. She felt sick with fear and anger, but she did not agree to anything. She walked away, heart pounding, knowing the threat was now real and close. When she told the cowboy everything that night, there were no half-truths left. She spoke until her voice shook, laying bare the past she had hidden and the danger it posed. The rule about no attachments shattered under the weight of honesty. He did not react the way she feared. He did not pull away or accuse. He stood still, listening, hands clenched at his sides. When she finished, he exhaled slowly. "You trusted me with this," he said. "That matters. It could cost you everything," she replied. "So could pretending it does not exist," he answered. "We face it together." Those words changed something between them. The air felt charged, alive with possibility and risk. They stood closer than ever, the space between them no longer empty but filled with unsaid feeling. Plans were made quietly. He spoke with all eyes, neighbors willing to stand firm. Legal papers were gathered, old records dusted off. Strength met strength, and the ranch braced itself. The gathering that followed was larger than any before. Bankmen, claimants, neighbors, all came to see how this would play out. She stood at his side, steady, her presence no longer just a symbol, but a statement. When questions were raised, she answered with clarity. When doubt crept in, she met it with calm resolve. The man from her past watched from the edge of the crowd, his confidence wavering as he realized she was not alone. The cowboy's gaze found him, sharp and warning. Lines were drawn without a word spoken. That night, after the crowd dispersed, the ranch felt different. The storm that had been building finally broke, rain sweeping across the land in sheets. They stood on the porch together, watching the water soak into the soil, the earth drinking it in like a promise. "We are close to the end of this," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. One way or another. The kiss hovered between them again, unspoken and forbidden no longer by rule but by timing. Too much hung in the balance. They turned away from each other, choosing restraint when every part of them leaned toward something more. As dawn approached, the ranch slept uneasy but hopeful. The conflicts had not resolved, the threats still loomed. But something had shifted. They were no longer pretending to stand together. They were doing it. And as the sun began to rise over the plains, casting light across the land they fought for, both knew that whatever came next would decide more than ownership or safety. It would decide whether a marriage born of necessity could become something real, and whether the promise of a happy ending was strong enough to survive the final test still waiting just ahead. The final test did not arrive with gunfire or shouting, but with papers, witnesses, and a truth spoken out loud. The morning after the storm, the ranch yard filled again, this time with men who believed the fight could still be won through pressure and fear. The bank representatives stood stiff and formal. The distant relatives arrived with documents they claimed proved old rights. And the man from her past lingered near the edge, confident that silence could still be bought. The rich cowboy met them all with a calm that surprised even those who knew him well. He had prepared for this moment without boasting or drama. He laid out records showing payments made, debts cleared, and land reclaimed legally and fairly. Neighbors stepped forward one by one, men and women who had watched him work the land year after year. They spoke of fences repaired, wages paid on time, help given without being asked. Respect, once earned quietly, now spoke loudly. When it was her turn, she did not hesitate. She spoke of her past honestly, without shame or excuses. She told how fear had followed her across states, how silence had once been the only way to survive. Then she told how that silence ended here, on this ranch, beside a man who chose truth over comfort. The crowd listened and something shifted. What had once been gossip turned into understanding. The man who had tried to threaten her saw the ground slip away beneath his feet. His leverage vanished when the truth stood in daylight. With no secrets left to trade, he left town before sundown, his shadow shrinking behind him. The bank withdrew its claim. The legal challenge collapsed under scrutiny. One by one, the threats faded, not with triumph, but with relief. The ranch stood whole, its future no longer questioned. In the days that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. The fences stayed strong, the cattle grazed peacefully. The house felt warmer, not because it changed, but because the people inside it did. The rule that once governed everything no longer held power. It had served its purpose and then quietly stepped aside. One evening, as the sky burned gold and red, they stood together near the barn where so much silence had once lived. He looked at her without guarded distance now. "I ordered a lie," he said simply. "And somewhere along the way it became the truth I needed." She smiled, the weight she had carried for so long finally lifting. "I agreed to pretend," she replied, "and found a place where I did not have to run. This time, when he kissed her, there was no fear in it, no rule breaking, no rushing. It was steady and sure like the land beneath their feet. The past stayed where it belonged, acknowledged, but no longer in control. Their marriage became something the town spoke of with respect instead of curiosity. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. A rich cowboy who learned that strength could be shared. A woman who proved that survival could turn into belonging. Together, they built more than a shield against the world. They built a home. As seasons passed, the ranch thrived. Laughter found its way into the house. Long rides turned into shared plans. The land that had once been defended now simply lived, steady and free. And when people later asked how it all began, they spoke of an order, a rule, and a kiss that changed everything. But those who truly understood knew the real story was about courage, trust, and choosing love when it finally stood within reach.